When a noble brat with a pretty face hired the MC as a training dummy, she assumed he would be nothing more than a punching bag because he was a commoner. The MC hit her with a classic smug challenge and asked how much strength he should use to be useful to her. Thinking he was joking, she told him to go all out. As the match began, she fired a low-rank spell that the MC easily dodged. He then taunted her again, asking if that was supposed to be her next attack. In response, she launched a barrage of magic arrows, but he destroyed them with a simple basic spell. Realizing he was not an ordinary commoner, she became serious and unleashed a volley of flaming arrows. This time, the MC casually raised a magic shield, triggering a small explosion. Being the reckless noble brat that she was, she used the smoke as cover and attempted a desperate sneak attack. It did not go well for her. Going back to the beginning, the MC had spent his entire life in Ebelstein, where he met a lying old geezer. The old man could use one-star magic and never missed a chance to brag about it. He also completely lost his mind whenever kids pranked him. He was the one who taught the MC the basics of magic and set him on the path of becoming a mage. There was no grand reason behind it. The geezer needed followers, and the MC needed magical knowledge. The seasons passed in the blink of an eye as the old man guided him through his training. One day, the MC successfully filled his body with mana. The disbelief on the geezer's face was impossible to miss. As the MC opened his eyes, he released a burst of magical energy that formed an arrow and shot into a nearby tree. That was how he spent his first year beside the geezer, handling countless errands just to become a one-star mage. One night while drunk, the old man told him that beyond the walls, some nobles reached 3 stars before even coming of age. He claimed that a commoner like the MC could never compare and warned him not to get cocky. According to him, the MC would hit a wall the moment he reached 2 stars. The geezer was always ranting about bloodlines. He never stopped talking about the gap between nobles and commoners. Sometimes, the MC wondered if it was simply an inferiority complex. That night felt unusually long. When he arrived the next day, he found the old man's corpse covered in bruises. It looked like he had been beaten to death. The MC knew he was the type to pick fights, but he later learned the truth. The geezer had been caught stealing a 2-star spellbook from a warehouse and was beaten by the guards. No one understood why a man who already had one foot in the grave would do something like that. Then, a system panel appeared before the MC. It asked him to choose his primary school of magic. As expected, he was not originally from this world. Just like that, for years past. That was when he met Kadia Flameheart. She was the former mistress of a fallen noble house and a 3-star mage sought after by every guild. While staying in town, she accepted contracts through the Beldun mercenary corps and taught the MC magic. He learned a great deal from her. Most of those lessons began at a tavern called Beldun's Tier. During one of their lessons there, Kadia explained that every mage naturally develops the desire to climb higher. She believed a young mage named Derek had the talent to do exactly that. At the same time, she warned him that excessive greed would only slow his growth. Derek told her he would remember that. After the lecture, Kadia instructed him to close his eyes and focus on his mana. She told him to calmly sense where it was being generated, understand its flow, and imagine using it to bring his thoughts into reality. Following her instructions, Derek concentrated. A blue wave of mana soon spread around his body. Kadia was convinced that Derek possessed an unusually large amount of innate mana. She also noticed how stable it was and believed it was the result of all the practical experience he had accumulated over the years. Just as Derek opened his eyes, a loud explosion echoed in the distance. The entire tavern erupted into chaos. Mercenaries rushed outside, demanding to know what had happened. Some even believed they were under attack. Before Derek could react, Kadia grabbed his hand and told him to stay quiet and follow her. She led him to a secluded location and told him to listen carefully. Kadia reminded him that nobles were extremely protective of their privileges, and among those privileges, magic stood at the very top. She explained that people often viewed natural talent as a blessing, but that belief mostly applied to nobles. She then revealed that it was incredibly rare for a commoner to reach 3 stars. Every commoner who had managed such a feat had dedicated their entire life to magic. Her expression turned serious as she lowered her voice. Kadia explained that what Derek had just cast was a 2-star delusion-type spell known as auditory hallucination. Without even realizing it, he had become a 2-star mage at the age of 14. After that, Kadia continued traveling with him and passed down many different spells. She also taught him about the noble society she once belonged to and the customs of the upper class. Before he knew it, another year had passed. Then Kadia left. The county of Elvester had appointed her as a private tutor. House Elvester was one of the most influential noble families around. Even the Grand Duke treated them with respect because Count Elvester stood behind them. For Kadia, it was an opportunity she simply could not turn down. Becoming the magic instructor of a noble from such a prestigious family was considered a great honor. Before leaving, she gave Derek a 2-star spellbook as a farewell gift. Looking at his status screen, he had already collected a respectable number of spells. A year later, through constant study and practice, Derek had improved enough to completely master 2 additional 2-star spells. By this point, he was already 16 years old, but he had no intention of stopping there. One day, he visited the mercenaries' tavern, where Jaden, the leader of the Beldun mercenary corps, informed him that they had finally landed a proper request. Derek asked what kind of request it was. Jaden told him it came from House Duplain of the Grand Duchy. Even Derek was surprised by that. He asked why a family of that status would hire mercenaries like them. Jaden immediately scolded him and said the reason did not matter as long as they got paid. According to him, the Duplains had so much money they could spend it like water. He also pointed out that working with them could open doors for valuable future connections. Derek then asked what exactly the job involved. Jaden explained that it was nothing extraordinary. They only needed to eliminate a few monsters near the outskirts of the Grand Duke's territory. That answer only made Derek more suspicious. A family as powerful as House Duplain should not need a small mercenary corps to deal with a handful of monsters. The moment he heard that, Derek got up and headed for the door. He told Jaden he was not interested in the contract. Jaden immediately yelled for him to stop. Derek told him to find someone else since he already knew he did not take shady jobs. Jaden sighed and admitted he would have preferred to handle it himself, but the client specifically needed a mage. Mages were becoming increasingly rare among mercenary groups, and Derek was the only one available. That did not convince Derek. He pointed out that needing a mage to kill a few monsters sounded even more suspicious. Then Jaden tossed him a gold coin as an advance payment. Derek suddenly found himself willing to hear the rest of the proposal. Money had a strange way of improving his judgment. Not long afterward, 3 people arrived. One of them wore a hood that completely hid her face. Jaden introduced them as the clients, but the elderly man among them immediately objected. He looked at Derek and declared that he was just a child. He told Jaden that he had expected someone far more impressive. Jaden defended Derek and insisted that he was the best mage he knew. The old man still refused. Just as he was about to leave, the hooded woman quietly whispered something to him. Whatever she said worked. The old man immediately changed his mind. Soon after, they headed to the plains to begin the hunt. The mission itself was simple. A group of goblins appeared, and Derek dealt with them without much effort. Using both magic and physical ability, he tore through them so quickly that they barely had time to react. Before long, the goblins were nothing more than a pile of corpses. Afterward, the dispatch officer praised Derek for clearing so many monsters in such a short amount of time. Once the mission was finished, he returned to the tavern. The moment Derek stepped inside, Pelline started yelling at him. She accused him of becoming a noble's lapdog. Jaden reminded her that no matter what happened, they were never supposed to bow to trashy nobles. Jaden then calmly pointed out that the job paid extremely well. That immediately caught her attention. She demanded to know how much Derek had been paid. The moment she heard he had received 1 gold coin, her entire attitude changed. She started shouting that she wanted in on the next job because she could also crawl under a noble's legs if the pay was that good. Jaden yelled back and told her to shut up. He also pointed out that crawling under a noble's legs was not actually part of the job. Eventually, Pelline drank herself unconscious. Once the tavern became quiet again, Jaden asked Derek how the request had gone. Derek told him it was nothing special. All he had done was kill a few goblins, and before he knew it, the mission was already over. Jaden admitted that the clients gave off a terrible first impression, but he could not deny that they had plenty of money. Derek agreed with that much. Still, something about the whole thing felt wrong. He was convinced they were hiding something. He told Jaden that the dispatch officer claimed he was searching for 3 specific qualities: youth, stamina, and social skills. The problem was that Derek barely qualified for any of them. He also pointed out that the woman who introduced herself as a kitchen maid had hands that were far too clean for someone supposedly doing rough work every day. He was about to list a few more suspicious details when Jaden cut him off. He reminded Derek that they were mercenaries, not investigators. Their job was simple: accept the request, complete it, collect the payment, and leave. Derek could not argue with that. The world was a harsh place, and earning a living mattered more than satisfying his curiosity. The next day, he helped clear out another group of goblins. Once the work was finished, Jaden eagerly approached the clients to collect their payment. When he received 2 gold coins, he nearly lost his mind from excitement. Derek could not even blame him. Then, the dispatch officer approached Derek. He said he valued Derek's abilities and wanted to entrust him with another request. He asked if he was interested. Both Derek and Jaden were confused. The old man decided to skip the formalities and immediately get to the important part. The reward would be 15 gold coins. The moment Derek heard that number, he accepted before even asking what the job was. In his defense, 15 gold coins was a ver. Not long after, they traveled to the Duplain estate. Jaden was completely overwhelmed by the size and grandeur of the place. Before entering the estate, the old man stopped them. He said it was time for proper introductions. He revealed that his name was Dila and that he served as the Grand Steward of Duke Duplain's household. He apologized for hiding his identity and explained that the nature of his duties required discretion. The woman then introduced herself as Katarina. As it turned out, she was not a kitchen maid at all. She was the head maid of the estate. Jaden was so shocked that he immediately bowed and hurriedly introduced himself. None of this surprised Derek very much. He had already suspected they were hiding their true positions. More importantly, it confirmed that the hooded woman traveling with them was someone of considerable status. A moment later, she removed her cape. For the first time, Derek saw her face clearly. With a bright smile, she introduced herself as Aisline Eleanor Duplain. Then, she revealed the reason he had been brought there. She wanted to hire him as a magic tutor for her younger sister, Dila. For a moment, Derek was completely speechless. A commoner being hired to teach a noble lady was not something that happened every day. While Derek was trying to process that information, a heated discussion was taking place elsewhere in the estate. Inside his office, Duke Duplain was meeting with his eldest son, Valerian. Their conversation was interrupted when another son, Reg, stormed into the room. The Duke immediately told him to compose himself. Reg fired back that Dila was the one who needed that advice. He complained that she had gone too far and had even started beating servants he personally hired. Valerian urged his brother to lower his voice and reminded him that their father was in the middle of an important meeting. Reg ignored him. He told the Duke that 10 servants had already quit during the past month because of Dila's behavior. According to him, she constantly broke things whenever she felt like it. He then directly asked his father how much longer he intended to ignore the situation. Valerian finally lost his patience and ordered Reg to leave. Reg refused. Instead, he argued that it was time to let Dila go since the family already had an heir. The Duke immediately replied that such a decision was not Reg's to make. Reg continued anyway. He mentioned that Dila had already investigated a monastery where Dila could be sent. In his opinion, it would be better for her to dedicate herself to religious service rather than remain a burden on the family. The moment those words left his mouth, he crossed a line. The Duke stood up and slammed Reg's head against the table. He reminded his son once again that Dila's future was not his decision to make. Even then, Reg refused to back down despite his father's anger. He insisted that a decision regarding Dila would eventually have to be made. At the same time, Aisline and Derek were making their way deeper into the main castle. As they walked, she asked whether he had heard anything about Dila. Derek told her that he had seen Dila's name in the Duplain family registry. Aisline lowered her head. Her expression became noticeably gloomy. She quietly explained that Dila was not well known to the public. As they continued through the castle, they ran into Valerian and Reg. Valerian greeted Aisline and asked how her time in Ebelstein had been. Aisline politely replied that she had been living comfortably thanks to his support. Valerian nodded and suggested they catch up later since he needed to tend to Reg's injuries. Not long after, Aisline and Derek entered Duke Duplain's office. Aisline greeted her father, and he mentioned that he had already heard about her accomplishments in Ebelstein. With a smile, she gave him all the credit. She then introduced Derek as the magic tutor she had brought from Ebelstein, explaining that he would be responsible for teaching Dila. After the introduction, Aisline excused herself, saying she did not want to interrupt her father's work. Derek was about to leave with her when Duke Duplain asked him to remain behind. Once Aisline was gone, the Duke studied him for a moment. He admitted that he was surprised Derek was still so young. Then he asked whether he could use magic to any reasonable extent. Derek modestly replied that he knew a little one-star magic. The Duke removed his glasses and became noticeably more serious. He told Derek that there was no need to lie because humility was not always a virtue. The moment he said that, Derek understood exactly what was happening. He was standing in front of a 5-star mage. Someone at that level could see through such a weak attempt to downplay his abilities. Derek immediately apologized in case he had come across as disrespectful. The Duke waved it off and said he understood why he acted that way. He then pointed out that, judging by his appearance and age, Derek did not exactly look like someone suited to be a magic tutor. Derek told him the truth. He was a mercenary. The Duke simply nodded. He said he would not pry into his affairs since Aisline had personally selected him. Because of that, he was willing to trust her judgment. He informed Derek that he would be granted access to the annex where Dila lived. Afterward, he said a maid would escort him there. Just as he was about to dismiss him, Derek stopped him. He said there was something he wanted to ask. The Duke gave him permission to speak. Derek reminded him that he was a mercenary. He explained that he had been hired to help Dila learn magic and prepare her for noble society. The Duke asked why he was stating something so obvious. Derek replied that he had a request regarding that matter. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the estate, Dila was making life miserable for her maid. She threw whatever she could get her hands on while the poor girl repeatedly apologized. Dila eventually screamed at the maid to get out. She even threatened to ruin the girl's face if she ever entered her room again. At the same time, Jaden was having a conversation with Aisline. He asked why she had chosen Derek. According to him, countless magic tutors would gladly fight for the opportunity to teach a member of the Duplain family. He also pointed out that Derek would have a difficult time guiding Dila since he was a commoner and she was a noble. Aisline then revealed that she had already tried hiring renowned magic instructors from all over the continent. Every single one of them had eventually given up. That was why she changed her approach. She admitted that Derek was a mercenary, but she believed he understood noble customs and cultures surprisingly well. Jaden then explained why. He revealed that one of Derek's teachers had been a fallen noble who was once quite accomplished. According to him, Derek had learned many things from that person. Aisline finally understood why he appeared refined and polite despite his background. She believed he might be able to gently guide Dila and help her change. Jaden, however, could not help laughing. He told Aisline that she needed to get better at reading people. According to him, Derek was a mage who grew up on the streets and had been working as a mercenary before even reaching adulthood. Did she really think someone raised in those conditions could survive on refinement and kindness alone? Not long afterward, a maid escorted Derek toward the annex. When they arrived at Dila's room, he knocked on the door. After receiving no response, he stepped inside anyway. Then he introduced himself and offered his greetings to the noble lady he was supposed to teach. Dila was sitting on the opposite side of the room when he entered. She told him to come closer. Derek did as instructed, but the closer he got, the more suspicious her smile became. The moment he stepped within reach, she dumped a bucket of foul-smelling water over his head. Then she mocked him by calling him a sewer rat. Not satisfied with that, she climbed onto her chair so she could literally look down on him. She grabbed another bucket and poured even more stinking water over him, proudly explaining that she had prepared it beforehand. Throughout the entire performance, Derek remained silent. Eventually, she ran out of water. Seeing that he had not reacted the way she wanted, Dila became irritated. She kicked him in the chest, knocking him backward. Then she took off one of her shoes and threw it at him. After returning to her seat, she reminded him that he was nothing more than a sewer rat and should know his place. Before coming to Dila's room, Derek had already spoken with Duke Duplain. He told him that Dila's problems would not be easy to solve. That was when he asked whether the Duke was willing to give him full authority over her education. Then Derek slapped her. The sharp crack echoed throughout the room. For a moment, Dila simply stood there in shock. The reaction reminded Derek of a conversation he had with Kadia 3 years earlier. While traveling together, he had asked her what she would do if she had to teach a student who rejected kindness. She told him she would try to understand them, embrace them, and guide them with patience. Derek replied that her approach sounded too idealistic. Then he asked what she would do if the student wanted none of that. Kadia smiled and explained that the purpose of teaching was to lead someone toward a better path. If understanding and acceptance failed, then a teacher simply needed a different starting point. When Derek asked what she meant, she gave him a very simple answer. She said he should make sure the student feared ignoring him. Back in the present, Derek looked at Dila and told her that people deserved consideration and respect. Then he told her to get back up because he disliked repeating himself. Furious, she rose to her feet and slapped him across the cheek. She demanded to know how a low-born commoner dared to lay a hand on her. Before she could finish her rant, Derek slapped her again. Then he informed her that he also disliked making people repeat themselves. To his surprise, Apparently, she thought she had finally trapped him. She immediately began screaming for Duplain. According to her, Derek had assaulted her. Within moments, Duplain and several maids rushed into the room. They hurried to Dila's side and asked whether she was all right. Duplain then turned toward Derek and demanded an explanation. He asked what he thought he was doing by striking a member of the Duplain family. He also warned him that there would be serious consequences if the Duke learned about this. Without saying a word, Derek pulled out a written document. It was a letter personally signed by Duke Duplain. The document granted him full authority over Dila's education and allowed him to handle it however he deemed necessary. After reading the letter, Duplain's expression immediately changed. The Duke's signature was unmistakable. There was nothing he could do. News of the incident spread quickly. When Valerian heard what happened, he stormed toward Derek's room in a rage. The moment he arrived, he grabbed Derek and looked ready to throw a punch. Before he could do anything, Rage stepped in and stopped him. He told Valerian that starting a fight would solve nothing and that they should discuss the matter like civilized people. Derek calmly explained that everything he had done was authorized by Duke Duplain himself. Rage backed him up and reminded Valerian that Derek was Aisline's guest. Attacking him would create problems for the entire family. More importantly, their father had already approved his methods. Valerian told Derek to follow him and instructed Rage to stay behind. As Derek walked out of the room, Rage quietly spoke to him. He said he had already heard what happened, and in his opinion, Dila desperately needed someone to knock some sense into her. Then he patted Derek on the shoulder and assured him that he had nothing to worry about because Valerian would not do anything extreme. Still, Derek could tell that Rage was frustrated. Deep down, he was unhappy that Valerian continued protecting their sister despite everything that had happened. A few minutes later, Valerian led Derek into a room that had once belonged to Dila before she was moved to the annex. Paintings covered nearly every wall. Valerian looked around the room before explaining that Dila used to love drawing. According to him, she would constantly ask him to look at her artwork. Whenever he praised her, she would blush so much that her face turned completely red. As Derek examined the paintings, he noticed something unusual. None of them were truly finished. Valerian explained that Dila often left blank spaces and only drew the parts she found interesting. After a moment of silence, he apologized for how he had acted earlier. Derek told him it was not a problem. Then he asked why he had brought him there. Valerian looked around. He wanted Derek to understand that Dila was not a child who deserved to be hated or beaten. According to him, she had not always been this way. At some point, she became obsessed with bloodlines and noble status. That obsession gradually changed her. Eventually, she was removed from the main house and confined to the annex. Valerian admitted that he did not understand why she had turned out like this. However, he was determined to stop her from being sent to the monastery. He explained that if Dila could learn even one-star magic, he believed he could convince their father to let her remain with the family. Then, with complete sincerity, he asked Derek to save her. As Derek looked at the books scattered around the room, he noticed something interesting. He pointed out that Dila had filled the margins with notes and observations. That told him she had not completely abandoned magic. He also noticed that the books on the far shelves were theory texts from the School of Regulations. Valerian confirmed his observation. He explained that most nobles studied through the School of Regulations. After examining everything more carefully, Derek told him he would do his best. Later that night, Dila was peacefully asleep in her bed. Then Derek showed up with a bucket of water. A moment later, she was no longer asleep. He told her to get on her feet. Dila stared at him as if he had completely lost his mind. Ignoring her complaints, Derek grabbed her by the wrist and told her to come with him. Dila was still trying to process what was happening while he dragged her through the hallways. The maids watched in complete disbelief. Some looked shocked, while others looked entertained. Not a single one volunteered to stop him. Derek continued dragging Dila through the estate and eventually out into the woods. Once they were deep among the trees, he finally let go and threw her onto the ground. Dila immediately jumped to her feet. She demanded to know whether he had gone insane. Then she shouted and asked who he thought he was to teach her anything. Derek looked at her and gave an answer she never expected. He told her that he had no particular interest in teaching her magic. According to him, the real reason he accepted the job was because he enjoyed bullying arrogant nobles. The moment those words left his mouth, Dila froze. She stared at him as if she had misheard something. Derek continued by telling her that being a tutor was merely a convenient excuse. As far as he was concerned, the job was really about putting arrogant nobles in their place. Dila still looked convinced that he was joking. That belief lasted right up until Derek drew his sword. He casually remarked that hearing nobles scream was surprisingly satisfying. At that point, Dila finally stopped treating the situation like a prank. She nervously asked whether he thought he would be safe after doing something like this. Derek assured her that he would be perfectly fine. After all, she was already on the verge of being sent to a monastery. Even if she complained, few people would take her seriously. He also pointed out that if things somehow went wrong, he could always apologize with his life. A commoner's life was not considered particularly valuable anyway. Then he gave her a grin that probably did not help the situation. He mentioned that running away was also an option. Considering how much trouble she caused the family, they might even thank him for removing a headache before eventually forgetting he existed. That was the moment reality finally hit her. For the first time, Dila genuinely believed she might die. Without another word, she turned and ran. She quickly realized that heading back toward the estate would be pointless because Derek would catch her almost immediately. Instead, she sprinted deeper into the forest. Apparently, she knew the woods well and hoped to lose him among the trees before circling back to safety. Judging by the determination on her face, she was already imagining his execution. Unfortunately for her, Derek had other plans. A fireball formed in his hand. The sight alone left her stunned. Fireball was a 2-star spell. The question written all over her face was obvious. How could a mercenary use 2-star magic? Before she could think about it any further, Derek launched the spell. He deliberately missed. The fireball exploded nearby with a thunderous blast. The shockwave shook the area and scared the life out of her. When she turned around, she found Derek smiling. Apparently, that smile was even more frightening than the explosion. Dila scrambled back to her feet and continued running. A few moments later, she tripped and crashed into the ground. Before she could recover, ice arrows began flying past her. Each one missed by mere inches. One arrow struck the earth directly in front of her face. The message was clear. If Derek wanted to hit her, he could. He called out and complimented her speed. Honestly, it was impressive. For someone who spent most of her time locked away, Dila was surprisingly fast. She ignored him and kept running. However, exhaustion was beginning to catch up to her. The longer she ran, the more obvious it became that escape was impossible. Meanwhile, Derek slowed down and examined his surroundings. Something about the forest felt familiar. Then it clicked. This was the same forest he had seen in Dila's paintings. Dila had been wandering these woods since childhood. Without realizing it, she had been sensing the mana flowing through the forest and expressing those feelings through her artwork. Derek was still putting together the details when movement flashed behind him. She charged at him with a stone raised over her head, intending to smash it into his skull. Derek reacted instantly. Using the flat of his sword, he knocked the stone from her hand. The rock flew away, and Dila collapsed onto the ground. He looked down at her and admitted that her determination was admirable. Most people in her situation would have continued running. She understood that escape was impossible, so she chose to fight back instead. That took courage. Derek told her that making such a decision could not have been easy. She was exhausted. She no longer had the strength to run. With his sword lowered toward her, Derek asked whether she had any final words. Even then, Dila's pride refused to break. She lifted her head and declared that she had no intention of apologizing. According to her, nobles did not grovel before commoners. Derek asked Dila why she was so obsessed with bloodlines. For the first time, her answer came without arrogance. She told him that if her bloodline was taken away, she would have nothing left. Then she slammed her fist into the ground. Tears filled her eyes as she asked whether he thought she had never tried to learn magic. According to her, she had tried countless times. No matter how hard she worked, nothing ever happened. Dila explained that once magic and painting were taken away, there was nothing left she could call her own. The only thing she still possessed was her noble bloodline. If that disappeared too, she genuinely believed she would become worthless. After listening to everything she had to say, Derek let out a long sigh. Then he drew his sword. He told her he had heard enough. Derek declared that this was the end. Then he swung his blade. Dila shut her eyes. A few seconds passed. Nothing happened. Slowly, she opened her eyes. To her surprise, an ice barrier had formed around her. Derek's sword had stopped the moment it touched the barrier. The most shocking part was not the barrier itself. It was where the mana came from. The mana creating the ice was flowing directly from Dila's body. She stared at it in disbelief. Meanwhile, Derek calmly put his sword away. Then he bowed. He congratulated her on a job well done and apologized for his earlier rudeness. At this point, Dila looked more confused than relieved. Derek explained that what she had just done might not qualify as proper magic yet. Technically, it was only a manifestation of mana. However, that did not change the important part. She had done it. Then she screamed. After everything she had been through, frustration, relief, confusion, and disbelief all came crashing down at once. Once she finally finished crying, Derek started treating the injuries she had picked up while running through the forest. As he wrapped her injured leg, he explained something important. He explained that most nobles were taught through the school of regulations. That was the traditional path favored by noble families. However, every school of magic ultimately led to the same destination. Then he explained her problem. She had been trying to learn magic through the methods of the school of regulations despite naturally belonging to the school of the wild. That approach was doomed from the beginning. Dila then asked how he knew she belonged to the school of the wild. Derek explained that she could naturally sense mana flowing through nature and unconsciously transfer those sensations onto a canvas. That was why her paintings felt so alive. Mages with the temperament of the school of the wild often began sensing mana in nature from a very young age. Most of them did not even realize they were doing it. After finishing the bandages around her legs, Derek stood up. He told her she should be able to walk now. Then he reminded her of one final thing. Manifesting mana for the first time was an important step. Derek told Dila that starting the next day, he would teach her how to manifest mana naturally. To his surprise, she actually thanked him. Afterward, he suggested they return to the estate. On the way back, Derek asked her about the sunset painting hanging in her old room. He told her it was beautifully done. Dila looked slightly embarrassed and admitted that it was her masterpiece. She also revealed that Derek was the first person to realize the painting was actually finished. The following morning, Dila woke up and immediately tried to manifest mana again. Nothing happened. She tried several more times. Still nothing. Frustrated, she climbed out of bed and headed for the door. The moment she stepped outside, she collided with a maid carrying water. The maid accidentally spilled the entire bucket onto her. As soon as the maid realized what she had done, all the color drained from her face. She dropped to her knees and began desperately apologizing. To everyone's surprise, Dila simply told the maid to watch where she was going. Then she walked away. The maid stood frozen in disbelief. Soon, several other maids rushed over and asked whether she was hurt. The maid explained that Dila had only told her to be careful before leaving. The entire group was stunned. Meanwhile, Derek was still asleep. Then someone began pounding on his door. Apparently, Dila had decided that sleep was no longer a human right. Dila heard the commotion and attempted to calm her down, reminding her to behave like a noble lady. A few moments later, Derek opened the door, half asleep. He asked what she wanted. Dila immediately demanded that he teach her how to control the mana she had manifested. The moment Duplain heard that she had manifested mana, he froze in shock. Personally, Derek was more concerned about. Instead of teaching her, he closed the door and told her to come back in the afternoon. Then he returned to bed. Dila was not pleased. She spent quite a while banging on his door and demanding that he open it. Derek ignored all of it. A proper sleep schedule was important. Much later, Reg happened to overhear the maids discussing the recent changes in Dila. The conversation quickly spread throughout the estate. Before long, Duplain informed Duke Duplain that Dila had manifested mana. The news came from the head butler, making it difficult to dismiss as a rumor. The Duke was visibly relieved. Reg, however, remained cautious. He argued that everyone was celebrating too early. Manifesting mana was certainly important, but it did not erase everything Dila had done up to that point. Valerian immediately became annoyed. He could not understand why Reg continued acting indifferent when Dila had finally achieved something meaningful. Reg replied that a single success was not enough to completely ignore the family's original plan of sending her to a convent. The discussion ended there, but it was clear that neither brother had changed his position. That afternoon, Derek finally decided it was time to begin Dila's lesson. When he found her, she was sitting alone with a gloomy expression. He casually remarked that she looked like she was sulking. Dila immediately denied it. According to her, she was not sulking. She was angry. Naturally, Derek continued teasing her. He pointed out that changing the name of the mood did not actually change the mood itself. The more he spoke, the more irritated she became. Eventually, she could not take it anymore. She jumped to her feet and loudly declared that she was, in fact. The moment Dila saw Derek's expression, she immediately straightened up. Apparently, some lessons left a lasting impression. Derek sat down and explained that just because she could manifest mana did not mean she was ready to use it recklessly. If she pushed herself too hard, it would only backfire. He told her he knew that from experience. Learning was important, but resting was just as important. Since she had already rested enough, it was time to study. Dila made a disgusted face and called him a boring, stuffy magic teacher. With a serious expression, Derek asked whether she wanted him to teach her in a less stuffy way. The moment those words left his mouth, she remembered everything that had happened in the forest. Not wanting a repeat of that experience, she immediately corrected her attitude. Derek informed her that today's lesson would focus on mana manifestation. Once she could freely manifest mana whenever she wanted, learning one-star magic would become much easier. He also explained that the School of the Wild had no rigid structure, making it ideal for self-study. Unlike the School of Regulate, Derek told her that she was actually very well suited to the School of the Wild. Dila looked confused and asked what he meant. He explained that her free-spirited personality had excellent compatibility with that school of magic. On top of that, she carried the blood of the Duplain family. Whether she liked hearing it or not, she was overflowing with talent. Dila's face instantly turned red. She looked genuinely shocked that Derek was praising her. He confirmed that he was being serious. After all, she had created an ice barrier instinctively under extreme pressure. That alone was proof of remarkable talent. Eventually, Dila reached a conclusion. Apparently, that meant she was a genius. Derek immediately corrected her. Having talent and being a genius were not necessarily the same thing. Dila disagreed. According to her, they were exactly the same. Elsewhere, Reg happened to witness some of their interactions. Far from being pleased, he looked increasingly irritated by the progress Dila was making. The following morning, Dila burst into Derek's room before he was fully awake. She proudly announced that she could now manifest mana on command. The only problem was that she could not control its direction properly. Over the following days, her progress accelerated. Every day, she discovered something new, and every day she became excited all over again. One afternoon, Derek left the annex and sat beneath a tree with a book Duke Duplain had given him. He was enjoying a rare moment of peace. Then Dila arrived. Naturally, she demanded to know whether her father had given him the book so he could avoid working. Derek told her yes. In fact, he was convinced that was the entire purpose of the gift. Dila refused to entertain his nonsense. Instead, she grabbed him and dragged him back toward the annex so she could show off the latest things she had learned. At a later date, Derek received a summons from Valerian. When he arrived at Valerian's room, he welcomed him inside and invited him to take a seat. After some brief conversation, Valerian asked how Dila had been doing lately. Derek told him she was making steady progress. However, mastering one-star magic would still require more time. Valerian nodded. Then he informed Derek that his mother had been away attending a social gathering but would be returning the following week. His tone became noticeably more serious. He warned Derek to be careful around her. Many nobles dislike seeing a commoner occupy an important position. Valerian asked whether he understood what he meant. Derek assured him that he would keep the warning in mind. Then he asked why he had called him there. Valerian stood and walked toward the window. Looking outside, he explained that he was the future head of House Duplain. Because of that, he believed his duty was to do that properly. He felt that sincerity was essential. The problem, according to him, was that people's hearts were far more complicated than they appeared. Sometimes their thoughts, desires, and values were impossible to understand. He admitted that life would be much easier if everyone shared the same beliefs and way of thinking. Unfortunately, that was not reality. By this point, Derek was completely confused. He finally stopped Valerian and asked what exactly he was trying to say. Valerian finally got to the point with a troubled expression. He admitted that Dila would not spend time with him anymore. Tears started forming in his eyes as he recalled how things used to be when they were children. According to him, Dila would always greet him with a bright smile back then. He wondered where that sweet little girl had gone and whether he would ever find someone like her again. Then he walked up to Derek with tears still in his eyes and asked if there was some way for him to regain Dila's favor. Derek replied that the answer was obvious. He was the only person Dila willingly followed around. In fact, she was probably shouting his name at the top of her lungs somewhere in the estate right now. Before Derek could leave, Valerian stopped him. He pulled out a doll he had made for Dila and proudly showed it to him. The problem was that the doll looked less like a gift and more like a cursed artifact. Derek honestly had to ask whether he was trying to bless someone or haunt them. Valerian immediately looked devastated. While trying not to cry, he admitted that he was completely hopeless when it came to things like this. Not long afterward, Dila's mother returned from her journey. She approached Derek and complimented his work, saying she had heard many good things about him. After introducing herself, she mentioned that she wanted to send him a gift. That was when Derek clarified something important. He explained that he was not affiliated with any noble house. The statement immediately confused her. Then Derek decided to be completely direct. He told her that he was a commoner. The moment she heard that, she froze. A week earlier, Aisline had thanked Derek for everything he had done so far. She explained that she would soon be returning to Ebelstein, which meant Dila would be entirely in his care. Jaden had also stopped by to say goodbye. Naturally, he spent most of the conversation teasing Derek. He told him to finish the job quickly and return to Ebelstein before Pelling lost her mind after hearing what had happened. After exchanging farewells, Aisline and Jaden departed in their carriage. They had already traveled some distance when Aisline suddenly remembered something important. She had completely forgotten to warn Derek that Dila's mother would be returning within the week. Jaden asked why that. What he did not know was that Dila's mother was practically the embodiment of anger itself. Back in the present, Dila's mother stormed straight into her husband's office. The moment she arrived, she demanded to know why a commoner had been appointed as Dila's tutor. Duke Duplain immediately looked exhausted. He asked her to lower her voice. She ignored him completely. Instead, she reminded him that Dila was their youngest daughter. The Duke replied that he was not particularly fond of the arrangement either. However, every qualified teacher from a respected bloodline had eventually given up on Dila. There simply were not many options left. That explanation did not satisfy her. She argued that hiring a mercenary to teach a noble daughter was inappropriate. The Duke patiently explained that capable magic teachers were difficult to find. On top of that, Aisline had personally recommended Derek. Even then, she refused to accept it. According to her, there should be a minimum standard for someone occupying such a position. Then she proposed an alternative. She suggested hiring Flam, the Duke's brother. Apparently, he had been unavailable the last time they asked, but she believed he should have more time now. The Duke stared at her in disbelief. He asked whether she was seriously suggesting pulling the man responsible for managing an entire territory away from his duties just to become a private tutor. Then he reminded her that Ebelstein was not a place that could be managed carelessly. She refused to back down. Instead, she argued that social standing mattered as well. According to her, noble society could be just as ruthless as any battlefield. She insisted that a teacher's role was not limited to education. According to her, a tutor also needed to prepare a noble for society. If Dila was introduced to noble circles while being taught by a common mercenary, she feared her daughter would become a laughingstock. At that point, Valerian stepped in and urged his mother to calm down. He reminded her that she had not come to the office to fight with their father. His mother immediately told him to stay out of it. In her opinion, this was not an issue that could simply be ignored. Just then, Reg entered the conversation. He pointed out that the real question was not whether Derek was a commoner. The real question was whether he was qualified. Reg admitted that a commoner becoming a noble's magic tutor was unusual. However, he argued that status should not matter if the person possessed the necessary abilities. His suggestion was simple. The easiest way to judge a teacher was by examining the student's results. Before he could continue, Duke Duplain interrupted him. The Duke firmly stated that Derek was the real deal when it came to magic. Reg accepted that, but proposed another idea. He wanted to test Dila through AM. According to him, if Derek was truly a capable teacher, Dila should have shown meaningful improvement by now. The Duke could not easily object to that argument. Satisfied, Reg left the room with a clear goal in mind. Valerian immediately chased after him. He demanded to know what Reg hoped to accomplish by challenging Dila. Reg stopped and looked at his brother. Then he asked whether Valerian genuinely believed Dila had changed. He reminded him of everything Dila had done over the years. Valerian replied that none of that changed the fact that she was still their sister. She shared their blood as family. They were supposed to support and protect her. Reg's expression darkened. He declared that Dila was becoming bad blood. In his eyes, her actions threatened to drag down the entire Duplain family. He argued that allowing her to debut in society without changing would bring disaster upon the house. Valerian was stunned. He had never realized Reg felt that strongly. Reg simply turned away. As he walked off, he said that Dila was the one who crossed the line first. That was why she remained isolated in the annex. The following morning, Dila burst into Derek's room carrying the notice for the upcoming spar. The moment she arrived, she informed him that if she lost, he would automatically be dismissed as her teacher. Derek told her that he was already aware of the situation. He also pointed out that Reg was an experienced one-star mage. Dila stared at him in disbelief. Then she yelled. She demanded to know whether that was all he had to say despite the fact that his job was on the line. Derek calmly reminded her that he was a mercenary. He accepted work, completed it, collected his payment, and moved on. Then he casually informed her that he had already been paid more than enough. That answer left her completely speechless. 1 week later, the day of the spar finally arrived. The arena had been prepared, and many important members of the household were present to watch. As guests continued arriving, Derek greeted Duke Duplain. The Duke seemed surprised by how calm he looked. He found himself wondering whether Derek was simply fearless or genuinely competent. Either way, it reinforced his belief that Derek was someone valuable to the family. Meanwhile, Reg stepped into the arena. His goal extended far beyond winning. He intended to completely crush Dila. In his mind, she needed to confront the consequences of her past actions and regret them down to her very bones. Earlier, Dila had asked whether Derek truly did not care about her future as long as he received payment. He told her she was missing the important part. Her magical ability was improving rapidly, even if she could not cast one-star magic yet. She was getting closer every day. Derek reminded her that she possessed the blood. Dila looked confused and asked why he was suddenly bringing that up. He reminded her of something he had already explained. The School of the Wild was built around self-discovery. That explanation only frustrated her. She demanded to know why he was talking about philosophy during such an important moment. Eventually, she calmed down. Then, for the first time, she spoke honestly. She admitted that she was far from the ideal student. Even so, she wanted to continue learning magic. More specifically, she wanted to continue learning from Derek. With complete sincerity, she confessed that she did not want another teacher. Derek looked at her for a moment before responding. He admitted that he knew almost nothing about the customs and etiquette surrounding noble magic spars. After all, he had never participated in one before. However, there was one thing he did know. He knew how to win fights. Then he asked her a simple question. Was she prepared to win? As those words sank in, Dila began imagining everything that would happen if she failed. The annex. The convent. The disappointment in her family's eyes. For the first time, the upcoming spar felt truly real. With determination burning in her eyes, she looked at Derek and told him to make sure she won. Back in the present, Dila stepped into the arena. She was not standing there as Raig's younger sister. She was not standing there as the youngest daughter of House Duplain. She stood there as Derek's student and as a mage. Once both participants took their positions, Dila stepped forward and explained the rules. According to him, the spar would follow the regulations used by the high-ranking mages of the Ebelstein-Kelbrum Salon. The loser would be the first person to trigger General Pelham's protective magic circle. After the rules were explained, Dila officially declared the start of the match. As for General Pelham's protective magic circle, it was an expensive magical accessory. The enchantment activated automatically whenever the wearer was about to suffer serious damage. Watching all of this, Derek finally got a first-hand look at how nobles fought. The match was limited to 10 minutes. Judging from Raig's posture, he had no intention of letting it last that long. The moment the duel began, he started chanting. His goal was obvious. He wanted to finish Dila before she had a chance to do anything. A powerful spell flew toward her. Dila immediately dodged and repositioned herself. Raig clicked his tongue in annoyance. He launched another attack, then another, and another. Dila continued moving. Every time he targeted her, she changed positions before the spell could connect. From where Derek was standing, he could tell that her control over mana had improved tremendously. Unfortunately, when it came to actual combat experience, she was still A. Dila quickly created an ice barrier to defend herself. The sight visibly surprised him. Dila was not using a proper star-ranked spell. Convinced that her barrier was nothing more than a cheap trick, Raig decided to smash through it with overwhelming force. Then he unleashed an even stronger attack. At that moment, Dila remembered her training. Derek had explained that mercenaries fought differently from nobles. Victory was the only thing that mattered. He had warned her that people might criticize her for winning with unconventional methods. However, criticism meant nothing if she was the one left standing. Derek had asked whether she could accept that. Without hesitation, she had answered yes. Back in the arena, Dila abandoned her ice barrier and ran before Raig's attack could destroy it. During their training, Derek had explained that many mercenaries won battles despite being weaker than their opponents. The reason was simple. They fought with everything available to them. Raig continued bombarding Dila with long-range attacks. Meanwhile, Dila kept moving. Derek had taught her that controlling the battlefield was just as important as controlling magic. Mercenaries used terrain. They used every possible advantage. Most importantly, they took advantage of every moment their opponent lowered their guard. Another spell descended toward Dila. She raised an ice barrier and blocked it. However, a second attack was already approaching from a different angle. Dila failed to notice it. The spell struck. A massive explosion erupted across the arena. The audience gasped. Dila's mother immediately panicked. Convinced that her daughter had been defeated, she demanded that the match be stopped. She even shouted at Dila to intervene. However, Duke Duplain remained calm. He told her to sit down because the duel was not over. She stared at him in disbelief. According to her, everyone had just watched Dila get hit directly. If Dila had truly suffered a decisive blow, General Pelham's protective magic circle would have activated. Duke Duplain had also noticed something interesting during the entire exchange. While everyone else was reacting to the explosion, Derek had not even blinked. That alone told him everything he needed to know. Derek already understood exactly how much Dila had grown. Meanwhile, Raig was becoming increasingly uneasy. General Pelham's protective magic circle had not activated. Suddenly, he noticed a crack spreading across the platform beneath him. Before he could react, several ice spears burst out from below. He barely managed to avoid them. That was when he realized what Dila was doing. She was attacking from underneath the platform. By normal standards, leaving the platform should have resulted in an immediate loss. Reg immediately looked toward Dilan, expecting him. Only then did Reg understand. The area beneath the platform was still considered part of the arena. Before he could organize his thoughts, another ice spear shot upward. He dodged again. Then another attack followed, and another. The attacks kept coming relentlessly. The biggest problem was that he could not see Dila. Meanwhile, Dila could keep attacking until something eventually landed. For the first time, Reg truly understood what was happening. Dila was fighting without a shred of noble etiquette. Then their eyes met. The moment he saw her expression, something clicked. Dila looked completely calm. At that moment, Reg realized this was not Dila's strategy alone. Derek was clearly involved. After all, this was exactly the kind of fight he would teach. Reg decided to abandon convention as well. He removed his coat and prepared to fight seriously. In the audience, Dila's mother was horrified. Her daughter was crawling around beneath the platform like some tunnel-dwelling monster. She immediately demanded that the match be stopped. Duke Duplain refused. No rules had been broken. As far as he was concerned, the duel would continue. Beneath the platform, Dila was using her unique sensitivity to mana. She could see the flow of mana moving through her surroundings. Using that advantage, she kept launching attacks toward Reg. Forced onto the defensive, he could no longer comfortably recite long incantations. He spent most of his time jumping away from incoming attacks. Just as he was beginning to get cornered, he noticed a tall support pole standing in the middle of the platform. At that exact moment, Dila lost track of his mana. She immediately realized her brother was trying something. Still, she remained confident. The next time he started casting, she intended to strike before he could finish. At the same time, Reg reached a conclusion of his own. Dila could not properly track his mana from where he was standing. However, he also could not freely cast spells from his position. There was only one solution. He would change the battlefield itself without using an incantation. Reg launched a ranged attack directly at the base of the support pole. The structure snapped. The massive pole crashed onto the platform. Using the impact, he destroyed a large section of the arena. Then he jumped down himself. If Dila wanted to fight underneath the platform, he would give her one. Through the dust and debris, he spotted her moving. An ice arrow immediately flew toward her. Dila managed to block it, but the pressure was completely different now. The attacks were faster and more aggressive. For the first time, genuine fear crept into her heart. Reg had realized something important. At close range, he held the advantage. All he needed was a single clean hit. Unfortunately for him, before he could react, she rushed straight at him and kicked him in the chest. The impact forced him down to one knee. As he struggled to recover, Dila threw a handful of dust directly into his eyes. The attack caused immediate pain and completely ruined his vision. The moment she realized he was temporarily disabled, she abandoned the fight and climbed back to the surface. Reg quickly understood what was happening. Dila was running low on mana. That was why she was desperately using every trick available. Even so, he refused to believe she could actually win. After all, this duel had been created to test whether Dila was worthy. He intended to prove the difference between them. A short while later, Reg climbed back onto the arena. As soon as Dila saw him emerge, she suddenly remembered one of Derek's lessons. He had told her to think of mana as paint. Her spellcasting was the brush. To create magic, she needed to gather the mana flowing around her and shape it into a complete image. That image would then become reality. Back then, she had been amazed while watching Derek demonstrate the flow of mana. Now, standing on the edge of defeat, she focused on those words. She reached out with her senses. Mana gathered at her fingertips. Following the image in her mind, she shaped it carefully. Moments later, a refined ice spear appeared before her. The spectators immediately noticed the difference. Dilan's eyes widened. Even Dila's mother was stunned. What Dila was displaying was unmistakable. It was one-star magic. As Dila prepared her final attack, Reg decided to stop holding back as well. He gathered every bit of mana he could control and created a large formation of ice arrows. Despite Dila's breakthrough, he remained confident. He was still the more experienced mage. Dila launched her spear. At the same time, Reg unleashed his barrage of arrows. The attacks collided in the middle of the arena. A massive explosion erupted. The shockwave swept across the battlefield, drawing gasps from the audience. Dila's mother nearly jumped from her seat. For several moments, nobody could see anything through the cloud of dust. Then the dust finally settled. A protective barrier had activated. 1 year earlier, Dila had informed Duke Duplain that a letter regarding an upcoming social gathering had arrived. As they walked through the halls that day, the Duke had noticed Dila sitting alone in her room. She had looked isolated, forgotten, almost invisible. Back in the present, the activated barrier belonged to Dila. The moment she realized it, the truth hit her. She had lost. All the determination she had built up collapsed at once. Tears streamed down her face as frustration poured out of her. Meanwhile, her mother immediately began criticizing Duke Duplain. She complained that the duel had been crud. She blamed him for allowing such a vulgar spectacle to take place. The Duke barely listened. His attention was completely fixed on Dila because he had noticed something important. When he was younger, he had been a knight who followed his king through countless battles. During those years, the king once told him that he possessed the eyes of an ambitious man. Looking at Dila now, he saw that same ambition staring back at him. The maids rushed toward her and asked whether she was injured. Dila said nothing. She simply continued crying. One maid attempted to guide her away so her wounds could be treated. Dila slapped the hand aside. Then she started walking. She stepped down from the arena. She passed Rake, who awkwardly congratulated her on putting up a good fight. Dila did not respond. The maids assumed she was heading back to her room. Instead, she kept walking. Eventually, she stopped right in front of Derek. Tears still streamed down her face. With a trembling voice, she admitted how frustrated she was. Then she apologized for losing. Derek stood up and looked at her. He told her that losing was not the end. If she felt frustrated, then she should use that frustration. She should climb higher. She should become stronger. His words broke the last bit of restraint she had left. She cried even harder. The maids watched helplessly from behind, unsure how to comfort her. A moment later, her mother arrived. Without saying anything, she pulled Dila into a tight embrace. Dila looked as though she wanted to speak. Her mother gently stopped her. She told her that explanations could wait. Right now, she needed treatment. After escorting Dila away, the woman turned around and walked directly toward Derek. The warmth she had shown her daughter disappeared instantly. The moment she stopped in front of him, she exploded with anger. She called him a vulgar rat. According to her, helping Dila become a one-star mage did not make him impressive. Without hesitation, she slapped Derek across the face. She accused him of doing nothing but teaching her daughter cheap tricks. Then she grabbed his shirt and shouted that he had turned the Grand Duke's daughter into something disgraceful. Another slap followed immediately. Her voice rose even higher as she continued hurling insults, demanding that he show some dignity. Before the situation could escalate further, Duke Duplain arrived. Dila's mother quickly turned to him, expecting support. Instead, he stepped forward and slapped her across the face. He told her she was the one behaving disgracefully. She froze in shock. She could not believe she had been struck over a commoner. Duplain calmly agreed that Derek was indeed a commoner. However, he also reminded her that Derek was Dila's teacher. He asked what kind of parent treated their child. Then he turned to Derek and asked him to forgive her, explaining that everyone had their own way of expressing love for their child. Derek took a deep breath and told him it was fine. Duplain then instructed him to follow him to the audience room for a private discussion. As they walked away, Dila's mother was left stunned, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Once they arrived at Duplain's office, the Duke praised Derek's work with Dila. He told him that he intended to reward him properly. Then he offered him something unusual. He asked if Derek wanted access to 3-star magic, the highest rank permitted to a commoner. Derek was surprised by how directly he had asked. It felt as though the Duke already understood him better than he understood himself. As a 5-star mage and Grand Duke of the nation, Duplain held immense authority. Without hesitation, Derek agreed. Before discussing the reward further, Duplain acknowledged that Derek had guided Dila well so far. However, he also stated that her current progress was still not enough to survive in high society. Derek replied that there were many people capable of guiding her from this point onward. Now that she had found her path, he was confident she would continue improving rapidly. Duplain disagreed. He told Derek that what Dila needed was not merely an instructor, but a true teacher. Then he looked at him and said he could sense something within him. According to the Duke, Derek carried an ambition too large to even be spoken aloud. He said he was willing to overlook it because it came from him. Derek was surprised by how openly the Duke spoke about allowing him to rise even further, perhaps beyond the limits imposed on commoners. At that moment, Derek realized exactly why Duke Duplain was so dangerous. The man was not afraid of what Derek might become. He was simply choosing to allow it. Duplain then admitted that he understood Derek would not remain in the estate forever. He knew Derek had ambitions of his own. He asked whether he was already prepared to leave when the time came. Derek told him yes. The Duke nodded and said he would not stop him. However, he asked Derek to continue teaching Dila a little longer. Then he repeated his question once more. Did Derek want access to 3-star magic, the highest realm permitted to a commoner? Derek's answer came immediately. Yes. When an opportunity like that appeared, there was no reason to refuse it. After their discussion, Derek was granted access to the estate library. Inside, he found 3-star spellbooks. He was genuinely stunned. There were people who spent their entire lives searching for a single 2-star spellbook. Yet he now had access to multiple 3-star volumes. At that moment, Derek realized he had even more reason to remain in the estate, though he also suspected Pelling would lose her mind if she ever found out. Later, he met Dila again. She immediately began bragging about becoming a 1-star mage. Derek pointed out that she had only successfully used 1-star magic once. Still, it counted. Dila shouted at him, asking if he was not at least happy that his apprentice was making progress, especially since he seemed so focused on his books. Derek did not give her the response she wanted. Eventually, she backed off on her own. He did, however, acknowledge her progress. She had come a long way in a short time. That reminded him of the days she had cried after losing the spar. Dila immediately tried to act tough. She claimed she had not been crying and that dust had simply gotten into her eyes. She also admitted that she had been worried Derek would be fired, adding that she wished her father had told her earlier that he was not going anywhere. At that point, Derek suggested they begin the day's lesson. Dila was improving quickly, so it was time for her to start learning additional 1-star spells. She immediately latched onto his words. To her, it sounded like he was confirming she was a genius. Derek pointed out that her progress was unusual, especially for someone who had only recently learned mana manifestation. Dila took full advantage of that statement. She proudly reminded him that she always followed through on what she said she would do. Then she began enthusiastically listing the spells she wanted to learn. One of them was magic arrows since it could be cast without a chant. While she continued planning, Derek cut her off. He told her she would be practicing mana manifestation again. Dila froze. She had clearly expected to move directly into 1-star spells. Derek explained that there were many reasons for this decision, but ultimately fundamentals mattered most. Before he could elaborate further, she suddenly agreed. She admitted that she had gotten ahead of herself and assumed they would be focusing on 1-star magic. Then she noticed Derek staring at her. She asked why. Teasingly, she wondered if there was something on her face. Derek told her no. He was simply surprised that she was listening so obediently. Dila immediately responded with attitude, insisting she had always respected his instructions. Derek reminded her that she had once poured dirty water on him twice. Her expression collapsed instantly. She looked genuinely shocked that he still remembered. To avoid letting the mood sink further, she quickly shifted her tone and suggested they continue training. They spent the rest of the day practicing until dusk. By then, Dila was completely exhausted. During a short break, Derek mentioned that he had heard she would soon become busy. She confirmed it. Starting the following week, she would also begin attending etiquette classes and receiving a proper noble education. Derek told her that was a positive development. She had already reached 1-star magic, so it was time she received proper noble training. Dila did not look pleased. She complained about everything she would be forced to study: basic etiquette, foreign languages, history, geography, botany, piano, and even sewing. She wondered aloud how Aisline had endured. That was exactly why Aisline was called the flower of Duplain and held such influence in Ebelstein's high society. Dila insisted she only wanted to study magic. Derek told her that was fine. After all, Duke Duplain had personally granted him considerable authority. Dila, however, was not convinced. Derek asked who she thought would stop him. She immediately answered, Mother. According to Dila, her father might have accepted Derek, but her mother was not someone who would simply let things go. Derek asked why her mother was so determined to remove him. Dila explained that her mother feared his influence. If Dila continued learning under him, she might lose her sense of noble dignity. In her mother's eyes, she could even end up resembling a mercenary. Dila pointed out that Derek's teaching style did not resemble anything noble at all. Derek simply told her it was nothing complicated. She looked confused. He explained that silencing her mother was not difficult. They only needed to remove her justification for objecting. Meanwhile, Dila's mother walked through the estate with unease lingering in her thoughts as she considered the possibility that Derek might be a harmful influence on her daughter. Her imagination escalated the concern into absurd images of Dila with gold teeth, running through fields and hunting wild boars like some untamed mercenary. The thought alone made her head ache, and she wondered what exactly Derek was even offering Dila in exchange for such changes. She acknowledged that her husband had accepted Derek's presence, but she still held authority as the mistress of the estate. While she was thinking about how to handle the situation, Dila appeared in front of her. At first, she expected the usual reaction. Dila running into her arms as she always had. But something was different. Dila was dressed properly in a refined noble outfit and greeted her with composed etiquette. She explained that she had been unable to leave the annex earlier due to her injuries and apologized for not meeting her properly. She added that she had many things she wanted to discuss, but she was already scheduled for a piano lesson that morning. Her mother stood frozen, unable to process how polished her daughter sounded. Dila then calmly stated that she had to leave because her education schedule was tightly arranged. Before leaving, her mother asked if she had already begun etiquette lessons since they were supposed to start the following week. Dila confirmed that she had. That answer left her mother even more confused since the lessons had not officially begun. After a brief exchange, Dila excused herself and left. As she walked away, she even politely advised the maid not to overwork herself. Everyone watching, including her mother, was left stunned in silence, trying to understand what had changed in her. Elsewhere in Ebelstein's noble district, Aisline was spending time with several friends. They mentioned that she had seemed troubled during the previous social gathering, but now appeared much more relaxed. Aisline smiled apologetically and explained that she had not intended to worry anyone. Most of the problems weighing on her mind had already been resolved, which was why she seemed calmer. One of her friends, the red-haired Alant Alphion Belmiard, admitted she had been concerned after hearing that Aisline had personally left the noble district to search for a teacher. Aisline thanked her and explained that the matter involved her younger sister, Dila. Since finding a suitable magic tutor was so important, she had decided to handle the search herself. Alant was surprised. If Aisline had gone that far, then the teacher must have been exceptional. Another friend, Denise Linier-Veltis, mentioned that she had recently heard rumors regarding Dila as well. In response, Aisline revealed that she had seen her sister not long ago and could barely recognize her. Dila had become polite, composed, and remarkably mature. On top of that, she had even manifested one-star magic. Aisline admitted that seeing such growth almost made her feel like she needed to work harder herself. Denise was particularly surprised because the Duplain family had always avoided discussing Dila publicly. She concluded that such a dramatic transformation could only be the result of an extraordinary teacher. Aisline nodded in agreement. She explained that although Derek came from an unusual background, his abilities were undeniable. That was precisely why she had personally traveled to the Beldun Mercenary Corps to recruit him. Alant was stunned once again when she learned the teacher was actually a mercenary. Even so, the fact that someone with that background had transformed Dila from a troublesome noble child into a proper young lady and a one-star mage only made her more curious. Finally, she asked the question everyone wanted answered. What is this teacher's name? Aisline smiled. Derek. Back at the estate, Dila was having a conversation with her mother. During the discussion, she casually mentioned that Derek had been teaching her etiquette. Miriella immediately responded by praising her for studying so diligently on her own. Dila corrected her at once. No. That was Derek. Miriella tried again. She asked what had been so difficult about learning etiquette alone. Dila answered honestly. It had been difficult at first, but Derek had made it easier. At that point, Mariella was reaching her limit internally. Every conversation somehow circled back to Derek. Every compliment involved Derek. Every improvement was apparently because of Derek. Unfortunately for her, there was absolutely nothing she could criticize. The servants constantly praised Dila's recent behavior. They spoke about how kind and considerate she had become. Even the gardener mentioned that her mood had improved dramatically and that she seemed like a completely different person. Then Dylan delivered the finishing blow. He remarked that Dila had changed so much that there were moments when she reminded him of Aisline herself. In his opinion, she was finally becoming a true noble lady. Mariella nearly lost her mind. There was simply no opening left for her to attack. Later, I was outside practicing magic while studying one of the 3-star spellbooks Duplain had lent me. That was when Reg approached. After apologizing for interrupting, his eyes immediately landed on the book in my hands. When I explained that the Duke had personally granted me access to it, Reg visibly froze. 3-star spellbooks were not something ordinary people casually borrowed. I admitted that the contents were still beyond my current level, but studying ahead never hurt anyone. Something seemed to click inside Reg's head. At last, he said he understood why his father referred to me as a true mage. After that, he finally brought up the real reason for his visit. Dila. Oddly enough, his face turned red before he even started talking. Then he asked if I knew what teenage girls liked. The next question was even stranger. Would Dila appreciate a handmade doll? The moment he said that, Valerian's horrifying doll immediately flashed through my mind. I rejected the idea without hesitation. Reg reluctantly agreed that it probably was not a good plan. As we walked back toward the estate together, he mentioned that the atmosphere throughout the household had changed. Valerian remained busy managing the territory. Duplain rarely expressed his thoughts openly, but even he seemed satisfied lately. Then Reg admitted something important. For a long time, he had refused to believe people could truly change. Now, after watching Dila, he was beginning to accept that he had been wrong. He sincerely thanked me. Then he mentioned something unexpected. He said Dila's magic felt different from everyone else's. Watching her cast spells was almost like watching someone paint a picture. The moment he said that, I immediately understood. Reg possessed exactly the kind of insight I expected from someone carrying Duplain blood. I explained that Dila practiced mana manipulation through the School of the Wild. Reg had at least heard of it before. I then explained that every mage developed a unique relationship with mana. Once Dila had discovered her own path, she would naturally continue growing by herself. Eventually, she would no longer need me. In fact, staying too long might only hinder her growth. Reg remained silent for a moment before nodding. He understood. 2 months passed. During that time, Dila became comfortable using 1-star magic and grew much closer to the servants around her. One morning, as a maid arranged her hair and decorated it with flowers, Dila happily chatted about everything she had experienced. She admitted there were countless things she had missed while isolating herself in the annex. And according to her, all of those changes were thanks to me. The maid smiled and pointed out that her happiness was written all over her face. Then she teasingly asked whether Dila was excited for her magic lesson. Dila looked surprised. Was it really that obvious? Before leaving, she handed one of the flowers to the maid. Save this for me. I want to give it to Derek later. That same day, the flower slipped from her hand. Because that was the day I told her I was leaving. There is nothing left for me to teach you. For a moment, Dila simply stared at me. Then I explained. That is the nature of the seasons. There is no eternal winter. And there is no eternal spring. Afterward, I met with Duplain. I explained that Dila belonged to the School of the Wild, though that was hardly new information to him. Then I told him something more important. If he continued involving himself in her development too closely, he would only end up clipping her wings. The Duke listened without interrupting. Judging by his expression, he understood exactly what I meant. There was no longer any reason for me to remain at the estate. After a long silence, Duplain rose from his chair and walked toward the window. He admitted that many things had changed during my time there. Because of me, Dila had finally found a path forward. For a moment, he spoke not as a Grand Duke, but as a father. He confessed that he had not always been present for his daughter. Managing the territory had consumed most of his attention over the years. Still, he was relieved. Relieved that Dila had finally begun to grow. Then he asked when I planned to leave. I explained that Aisline would be visiting the estate soon. When she returned to Ebelstein, I intended to travel with her. The Duke nodded. Then he mentioned the library key. I told him I would return it together with the spell books I was still reading and leave everything with Dilan before departing. His expression immediately hardened. There will be no need for that. I blinked. I would like the key returned now. The statement caught me completely off guard. After I handed it over, Duplain simply waved me away. You may go. I bowed and left the office. The moment I stepped into the hallway, I found Dila waiting outside. She looked furious. I calmly explained that it could not be helped. She already knew I would not change my mind, but she asked anyway. Can't you stay? I walked over and looked her in the eyes. Then I reminded her who I was. I was a mercenary. Soon, I would return to that life. There was still magic I wanted to learn. There were still roads I wanted to travel. Besides, when the time came for her debut in Ebelstein, we would meet again. And if my abilities had improved by then, I would gladly teach her something new. Dila clicked her tongue. You always know exactly what to say. She looked away. It makes it impossible to argue with you. I chose to take that as a compliment. That night, Dila had a nightmare. She woke up drenched in sweat, her heart pounding wildly in her chest. For several moments, she could not separate the dream from reality. A maid rushed into the room after hearing her scream. As soon as the maid arrived, a dangerous thought crossed Dila's mind. She could create a scene. She could lash out. She could become the old Dila again. If she did, maybe Derek would have a reason to stay. For a brief moment, she seriously considered it. Then she shook her head. No. She had already learned the answer. Hurting others would not make her valuable. Not anymore. She quietly told the maid she was fine and lay back down. The next morning, Aisline's carriage was ready. Alan informed me that departure time had arrived and suggested I finish my farewells. When I turned around, I found Dila waiting alongside Valerian and Reg. Valerian looked genuinely disappointed. Do you really have to go? I nodded. I need to return to where I came from. Reg remained silent, but his expression showed that he understood. Life inside the Duplain estate had never been where I truly belonged. Valerian stepped forward and told me to contact him if I ever needed anything. The sincerity in his voice made it clear he meant every word. Finally, I looked toward Dila. She was doing everything possible to avoid speaking. For several seconds, neither of us said anything. Eventually, she realized I was not going to look away. With as much attitude as she could manage, she folded her arms. What? Do you think I'm going to beg you to stay? She puffed out her cheeks. I'm not a child anymore. I smiled. Then I told her it had been an honor teaching her. Even so, I did not feel worthy of proudly calling myself her teacher. All I asked was that she remember what she had learned. Dila immediately scoffed. Too late. She pointed at me. I'm going to tell everyone you're my teacher. My headache arrived instantly. That means you'll never get to live quietly again. She grinned. Of course not. After all, she was the great Dila Duplain. Then, realizing she was becoming sentimental, she quickly looked away. Just take care of yourself. She hesitated. And don't do anything stupidly dangerous. I assured her I would be fine. Then I reminded her not to overwork herself either. Dila immediately snorted. I'm already an adult. I can take care of myself. The words hit me harder than expected. Because years ago, I had said those exact same words to Kadia. Back then, Kadia had pulled me into a tight embrace and begged me to remember her advice. Standing here now, looking at Dila, I finally understood how Kadia must have felt. Without thinking, I reached over and patted Dila on the head. Then I smiled. You don't have to become an adult so quickly. That was the final blow. Tears immediately filled her eyes. As I turned to leave, she called out to me one last time. This time, it was a proper farewell. I hope we meet again. I stopped and looked back. Then I bowed politely. I would like that very much. Let's meet again in Ebelstein. With that, I left the Duplain estate behind. Sometime later, I arrived in the commercial district of Ebelstein and pushed open the door to the tavern. Inside, Pelline was in the middle of beating someone senseless. The entire room froze when I entered. Pelline turned toward the door. The moment she saw me, she stopped. I smiled. I'm home. Jaden slid an expensive bottle of wine across the table. According to him, it was the kind of drink nobles enjoyed. It was a welcome home gift. Derek thanked him. Pelline looked him over and asked if he had always been this pale because he looked worse after living at the Duplain estate. Naturally, she wanted to know what had happened there. Derek told her it was nothing serious. He had simply been working. Pelline immediately complained that he was starting to talk like a noble. Jaden cut her off at once, handed her a drink to calm her down, and told her to relax. That only reminded Pelline of something else. She complained that she had been forced to work alone the entire time Derek was gone. Jaden, meanwhile, pointed out that Derek must have come back with good money. He asked whether the Duplain family had paid well. Derek replied that he had received something far more valuable than money. Then he pulled out a spell book. The moment they saw it, both Jaden and Pelline assumed it was a 2-star spell book. Derek corrected them. 3-star. The reaction was immediate. Both of them completely lost their minds, demanding to know where he had stolen it from and warning him that he was a dead man if anyone discovered he possessed something that valuable. Derek calmly explained that Duplain had given it to him personally. Pelline froze for a second. Then she grabbed Derek by the collar and asked if the estate happened to be hiring an archery instructor. After the chaos finally settled down and Pelline had fallen asleep, as she always did, Derek asked Jaden whether any work was available. Jaden looked at him as if he had lost his mind. Derek had only just returned. Even so, Derek told him he was ready to start immediately. Monster subjugation, simple requests, escort missions, anything. He admitted that he was slightly worried he might have lost his edge after spending so much time at the estate. Jaden laughed. He told Derek that he did not believe that for a second. Mages were always in short supply in the mercenary business, and if Derek wanted to stay busy, there would never be a shortage of work. Derek started the very next day. Almost immediately, he and Pelline fell back into their old rhythm. They moved through monster territory back to back, covering each other's blind spots without wasting a single movement. One area after another was cleared. By night, Derek focused on breaking through the 3-star wall. Every attempt ended exactly the same way. A large explosion. Hands that felt nearly shattered. And absolutely no progress. He already had a solid grasp of 2-star magic. The gap between 2-star and 3-star magic was an entirely different beast. From summer all the way through the bitter cold of winter, Derek and Pelline continued taking contracts and hunting monsters. When they finally returned to the tavern after another long expedition, Jaden looked at the pair and shook his head. According to him, only young people could repeatedly travel across the Kent Mountains in weather like that. He added that they were probably the only 2 lunatics capable of returning with a harpy's head under those conditions. Pelline let out a satisfied breath and declared that she finally remembered what it felt like to be alive. Jaden told them to take the next day off. They had earned it. Then he mentioned a newly arrived request that sounded perfect for Derek. It paid well. It was relatively easy. And it came from the Rohel Mercenary Corps on West Street through House Belmiard. They were looking for a commoner to assist with magic sparring. In other words, they wanted a punching bag. Jaden explained that all Derek had to do was take a few hits and collect the money. Derek accepted immediately. Elsewhere, Elant was having a conversation with her teacher. She had already been informed that a commoner had been arranged as her sparring partner, but she was clearly uncomfortable with the idea. Her teacher reassured her that it was part of her training. The commoner had been promised generous compensation, so she was free to go all out. To ease her concerns further, he mentioned that the mercenary was capable of using 1-star magic. Unfortunately, that did little to reassure her. Elant reminded him that she was already approaching the 2-star level. The difference between 1-star and 2-star magic was not a small one. It was the difference between heaven and earth. Not long afterward, she finally met the mercenary assigned to her. Derek introduced himself. The moment Elant heard his name, something flickered across her expression. It sounded familiar, as though she had heard it somewhere. Her teacher suggested that they move to the arena. As they walked, Elan quietly studied Derek and found herself wondering whether someone this young could truly be a mage. Inside the arena, she asked if he understood the basic etiquette of magic sparring. Derek answered that he did. Elan nodded and instructed him to resist as much as possible. At the same time, she promised to end the match quickly, though she was still worried about what might happen if she accidentally went too far. Derek then asked a simple question. How much resistance did she actually want? The question immediately irritated her. Derek explained that he needed to know the desired level if he was going to be useful to her. Elan paused for a moment before commenting that he had a rather strange way of speaking. Finally, she gave him her answer. She wanted him to resist with everything he had. Derek bowed his head slightly. Then he told her that he would do exactly as she commanded. In Elan's eyes, reaching 1-star magic at Derek's age was impressive for a commoner, but his attitude was something else entirely. This spar was going to correct that. It would remind him that between commoners and nobles, there was a line that simply could not be crossed. She chose Shockwave, a 1-star spell. It had no visible form. To sense it, a mage had to read the magic the instant it was released and judge its range before it arrived. Elan felt it immediately. The MC calmly told her that the next attack was coming. That lit something inside her chest. So his confidence wasn't baseless. The arrogance actually had skill behind it. Fine. But skill alone could not close the gap between a commoner and a noble. She switched to ice arrows. Not the rough, half-formed kind. Hers were clean, sharp-edged, and precise. Dozens of them rose into the air and circled around her as if they were alive. Her logic was straightforward. If Derek wanted to dodge, she would simply use enough volume to make dodging impossible. The MC casually flicked out a single magic arrow. Every one of her ice arrows split in half. By the time Elan processed what had happened, Derek's arrow had already buried itself in the ground at her feet. She stood there, unable to move. A commoner controlling magic with that level of precision was not something she had prepared for. Her teacher saw it too. The claim that Derek was a veteran mercenary was clearly no exaggeration. Just 2 exchanges into the match, Elan understood. He could not be handled casually. She pulled back, widened the distance, and began chanting an academy-style incantation. Her expression turned completely serious. She had abandoned the idea of winning through precise attacks. This time, she chose fire, and her intention was simple. She was going to blow the entire platform apart. The MC noticed the shift immediate. When her chant ended, she slowly raised her right hand. What condensed in the air this time was not dozens of arrows. It was hundreds. Hundreds of fire arrows. There was no way to dodge all of them. Derek didn't hesitate. He deployed his defenses at full power and took the entire volley head-on. It was a good thing he had already reached the 2-star level. Anything less would have ended the match right there. When the smoke cleared and he lowered his barrier, he noticed it. A faint flicker of magic. The fire arrows had only been a distraction. At that distance, he had no time to dodge and no time to raise another barrier. She really was a genius. In that fraction of a second, Derek pushed the output of a 1-star light burst to its absolute limit. A blinding flash swallowed her vision completely. Stripped of her sight, Elan steadied herself through instinct alone. Stay calm. Listen for sound. Find the rhythm. Take control of the fight again. She heard nothing. Her vision returned just in time. Relying on the faint traces of magic lingering in the air, she managed to dodge Derek's arrow once again. But even as she did, she found herself struggling to understand him. This man had far too much combat experience. She even began to suspect that he had not been trying to land that last attack at all. That he was deliberately pushing her beyond her limits. She was right. The moment her vision returned, Derek fired 2 arrows back to back. Under that pressure, she had no choice but to raise a defense. Just as she gathered mana to counterattack, the MC suddenly closed the distance. That should have played directly into her hands. Rapid casting at close range was exactly where she excelled. She told herself that the moment magic appeared at Derek's fingertips, she would strike first and end the match. But no magic appeared at his fingertips. Instead, lightning exploded from beneath his feet. Current manifestation. 1-star magic. Elan defended against it by the narrowest margin possible. Had she reacted even slightly slower, the duel would have ended right there. Her teacher watched silently from the sidelines. Outwardly, he showed no reaction. Inwardly, however, he had already reached a conclusion. The school of the wild. And yet, you still can't read him at all. You really are something, Derek. Elant slowly walked toward him. The spar was not over, but she stopped and offered him a sincere bow. For the first time, there was no trace of arrogance in her expression. She genuinely thanked him for showing her something interesting. Then a glint appeared in her eyes. She asked if this was how it worked. The MC shifted his mana flow. Then he caught her lightning mid-cast and redirected it. The instant Elant saw it, her expression changed. Derek had just used her own magic against her. She had never seen anything like it before. And she already knew what was coming next.